Thank you, Dr. Abdelfattah, and thanks for this interesting figures and information. So I almost have the same information when we need to talk about the internet usage. So I just want to highlight about the internet situation and especially about the fiber to the home in our region, in the MENA region. So it's easy to see that the internet users is growing every year, and the global digital information also is growing like twofold year on year. And it's good to see that Saudi Arabia, for example, is on the top of the countries who are sharing everything and most of the things online. And households comprise like 4 or 5 family members. So this is a huge usage. So you can imagine the 5 members of families using all consuming these bandwidths. And most of it's non-stop active connectivity on social networks and on multiple devices at the same time. So like, for example, like on YouTube, we saw yesterday a lot of presentations and talks about the downloads and the uploads, for example, on YouTube, like 100 hours upload per minute of videos on YouTube. So we can see that consumer demands for connectivity and speed are increasing at the speed of light year on year. It's huge. And we think that, like you just said, that 100 megabytes is just the beginning for such demand. It's not a target anymore, but I think it's time to talk about gigabits. Of course, gigabits is now in the talks of in the USA, in Europe maybe, but we need to talk about this when we look at this increase in usage in the internet in our region. So we, at the council, we conduct a yearly study about FTTH market panorama in the MENA region, and we have, in 2012, 2 million FTTHB home passed, with 100% growth rate from 2010 to 2012. We had 750,000 FTTH subscribers with 188% growth rate on the last 2 years. MENA is now considered the highest take rate in the global ranking of 32 countries. The average MENA take rate is 41% versus Europe 18%. UAE is #1 with homes penetration rate with 64.8% of penetration rate. And we have, we are very glad to announce that we just had like 3 other MENA countries in the ranking, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, just recently also. Those kind of information is really motivating us, and it's a good sign on how to see the FTTH growth in the region and the potential of a huge deployment to see in the future. So the situation today is still lacking somewhere. We have a lack of competition in the fixed broadband, which is delaying maybe the deployment of FTTH. We're talking about the FTTH, fiber to the home. But players with important international interface have well succeeded, like Etisalat in UAE, they are #1 in the FTTH deployment penetration, and Ooredoo in Qatar, for example, also. In addition to the new housing developments projects like in Egypt or maybe in Lebanon. We are seeing now even some starting stage countries like in Morocco, Iran and Iraq. There is a lot of FTTH project ongoing also. It's also very important to mention that with the mobile broadband growth in 4G and LTE, that is stimulating the operators' demand for fiber optics and become a must for the mobile backhaul. So we see an important role in the mobile market and the mobile operators also to support this mobile backhaul with the fiber optics, especially with the 4G and LTE deployment now is also increasing. Like just last week in Lebanon, they just launched 4G LTE, both of the mobile operators, and now seeking and even demanding for fiber optics deployment. So this is a few figures about what's going on about FTTH, and I will leave the other information maybe for the questions after that.
Thank you, Christine. Now we will go, yes, please.
Thank you very much for the interesting figures, and they are actually mind-blowing. But I'll be a little bit negative. I'll talk about the challenges that we are facing in deploying broadband. I'm talking specifically here on fiber.
Yes.
As DAMAMAX, we are a broadband-based company. We do FTTB, we call it FTTB, fiber to the building or fiber to the business. We haven't tackled the home users customer base yet due to many obstacles. First, laying the infrastructure. In Jordan, I'll give an example here in Jordan because we are, I'll talk deeply on the situation here. There is no infrastructure sharing. So every company wants to go in, has to start their own infrastructure, the trenches, the manholes, the deployment for the building, and that is very expensive.
By the way, this is a very important issue, the sharing. Without sharing, I think we will have big difficulties, especially on dark fiber sharing. And I just want to give an example in Saudi Arabia. We have extensive now deployment of fiber optics, but we see sometimes 3 companies are digging the same street in front of my house. 2 companies are digging at the same time. And this is, of course, extra money and lack of sharing. The same sharing is great, even spectrum sharing. We will talk, if possible, later on, but let's focus on.
Actually, sharing is caring, as they say.
Sharing is caring.
Okay, now this is one obstacle mainly, that there are trenches in the streets and there are pipes that are free, can be utilized for, to share it with other companies. But we are still in the monopolistic way of thinking that I do the infrastructure, I should control it. The competition is not yet ripe to a level that allow this kind of sharing. There's the monopolistic point of view. And the market is a little bit narrow, so that's understood in our situation. Another thing, it's not only the infrastructure sharing, the actual governmental legislation. If you want to dig the streets in a deep manner, having a 40-centimeter trench and manholes on the way, that will be, again, very expensive. There are new methods that you can do microducting fiber that are still facing a lot of problems due to lack of infrastructure knowledge. When we dig a street, we get a clearance from the municipality, for instance, that this street is free of all cables. Once we start digging, we find out there's an electricity cable, the water pipes coming in back and forth, and this is a very big obstacle of deploying actual fiber network. Another thing, one of the, like a half step to the fiber to the home is fiber to the curb, and use the local loop unbundling from the curb to the household. And this has been delayed maybe 10 years for now. And I don't think it will be any viable due to, again, to monopolistic point of views. Having fiber to the curb and then deploying VDSL or VDSL2 to the household with high speed, this will cut the cost tremendously. But still, we are very far from having such a thing. So what we decided to do is to take things in our hands and start actually deploying fiber to the business sector and to the enterprise sector. Maybe in the future, when micro ducts come in, I think we will have a good chance to start deploying fiber to actual households and getting the high numbers that we are talking about.
But this maybe will complicate the issue, because if you want to dig for business first and then dig again to the houses, you will have to have permission twice or 3 times or whatever, and you have to pay sometimes more. While there is no clear vision, just, I don't know, to coordinate that in one step.
The problem in Amman, there's a lot of difference between Beirut, for instance, or Cairo, or Riyadh. There's no concentration. You will see business scattered along households, and sometimes household in an industrial area, or households in business areas. The maximum height of building is 5 to 6 floors. Like in Cairo or in Beirut, you have 20 and 25 floors. Each floor have 4 apartments, so you're talking about 100 clients with one fiber thread. That's very cost effective. In Amman, if you get 5 to 6, 10 customers maximum, that's something good. So the cost is not justified. But when we go to the business requirements are much higher than the household. We're talking about direct internet access, we're talking about international MPLS, so there's more revenue coming out of businesses. And to dig as a layout plan and say, okay, I want to cover this area of residential, then we are spending more money than what we are getting in revenue. And that's a very difficult business case.
Okay, thank you. Latif, I know that you are the IPv6 president, forum president, and you are, of course, for many years are fighting to see more progress on IPv6. Can you elaborate on IPv6 and broadband, please?
Yes. So basically, we are having a lot of investments in this part of the world, because there is a catch-up happening at the same time. So the IP traffic will experience the highest growth in the Middle East and Africa. It's about 38%. Although Asia will be the #1 IP traffic in the world, even surpassing the US and Europe. Now, when you are investing in this time, it's like investing in a car and keeping the old engine in it. So you have to update also the engine. And the new engine in the internet is the new internet protocol. I know it takes a lot of time to get it through many people. Even IPv4 did not even fly within 2 decades. It took 2.5 decades to happen. But I think with the new investment, they should be future-proof in the future, especially in the mobile side, since the internet will go mobile by 90%. Although the backbone will be fiber as such, so that is not an issue. So LTE is a very good candidate for IPv6, especially with the experience of Verizon in the US. They have deployed LTE with IPv6 only. So 30% of their traffic now is happening on IPv6 for a number of reasons. So basically you will have addressability, so it's easier for billing, for tracking, for also for new services which are end-to-end. So you'll be able to cater for the numbers that you have mentioned, like Internet of Things. So this is what Ericsson has been promoting as 50 billion connections. So if you don't have V6, you will not be part of this big thing coming. So you'll be still working on the internet, so you need to get this done. So the hurdles so far are that it's really up to the government, especially supported by the regulator, to get the ball rolling, at least to set the example in the country that they are modernizing their networks by adding V6 to it. And I think the experience in Saudi Arabia is exemplary, and you've been leading in that area. Maybe you can share that with us later on, how you have managed to do it in Saudi Arabia, because apparently you are, I guess, in the Middle East, at least the #1 in this area. We have also a champion here in Jordan, that's Allah and his magic IPv6 lab. Maybe raise your hand if you want to have some training from him or get connected to the world internet. The ITU at the next regulator meeting is having the first session in order to get the regulators on board, so to play a leading role in the country. Because obviously in developing nations, industry has to fight for its bottom line, which is quite understandable. So they don't have the power in order to do it on their own. So they need a business case, and the best business case is the government itself. But the government needs to have the regulator to give them some guidelines and best practices. And I think that's the way we should do it here in the Middle East and Africa in order to get, at least to have some kind of leapfrog effect. And we have seen this now in Africa, where some 5 countries are on par with the US and Europe, which is a good sign. So you can even take your revenge. If you didn't do the internet at the beginning the proper way, you have a second chance to do it again. So the internet, broadband and so on, it's mainly for one reason, is that you would like to have all services to be on all the time. And it's up to you to use them or not. But this always-on concept is only possible when you have points of connections on the internet, and that's enabled only with real IP routable addresses, which today you don't get with IPv4. All of you are behind nets, so you're hiding. It's like we are using the internet of the 60s or the phone system of the 60s. So you have to go to a switchboard lady in order to connect you to the next possible correspondent. Then there are new features that can be used with the new protocol, especially all of these end-to-end connectivity, which allows you security, multiple connections. Most probably you will be able to shut down many of the viruses. It will help us to do better cybersecurity as well. So there are many things that are still there, and it's up to the industry to find customers in order to start working on these things. So I'm very hopeful for the Middle East in this area, especially with the leadership of Saudi Arabia. Oman has already, the regulator in Oman has taken the lead in his country and asked the telecom operator to deploy V6, and I think they will be announcing the service by the end of this year. UAE is the same thing. Bahrain is leading the ITU V6 thing. And I think maybe we have to get all the regulators here in the Middle East to sit together and design a very simple roadmap so that the governments can become the first customers, which gives the industry a business case.
Thank you, Latif.
Well, thank you, Doctor. First of all, you've said that we need to build it first and they will come.
Yeah.
We need to connect and do broadband everywhere. I tend to disagree with you on that because if we look at the usability of the broadband today at the Arab world, you'll be quite amazed of the kind of services that is used over the broadband that we have today. I think what we need in the Arab world, before talking about connectivity and broadband services, we need to talk about the educational system and improving and enhancing the educational system in all our countries, be it the very rich countries or down to the poor little countries like Jordan. Despite the fact we're very proud that we have achieved or accomplished some high, our illiteracy rates are diminishing, but there is a lack of quality of educational system that we have today. I'm part of a project where we connect schools today in Jordan to the broadband. And when we go to those schools, they have broadband, Yes, indeed, they have broadband, they have laptops, they have computers, PCs, and they're connected to the internet. However, I think there are certain basics that we lack them in those schools. Nutrition, a decent a classroom, a decent bench. So I think my opinion is that before we talk about broadband, we need to talk about basics, and the basics starts from the educational system. The other day I heard about from Dr. Dabdoub at the World Economic Forum. He was talking about an Arab Marshall Plan. And I think we need today an Arab Marshall Plan for education. And by doing that, and I think we will go to broadband, we will fix the basics, and then go to the rest of the things. Of course, when we do that, we will be able to create more jobs. I always look at Bangalore as a model city, and how a transformation was made in India. It took them courage, and they built one of the most 10 top preferred cities for entrepreneurial and for innovation in the world. That was in Bangalore. But they did not focus on broadband only. It was education, regulatory and environment and policy framework, of course, and thereafter the infrastructure and telecom services. We are pouring today in the Arab world billions of dollars in real estate projects, billions of dollars, and we are saying that we will create jobs. We don't want those kind of jobs. We want the young and youth to become a job creator than a job seeker. And if we want to do that, it's not by investing in the wrong directions, by building real estate projects. We have the largest media city in the world. What we want is not real estate projects. We want to invest in education and empower the youth with proper education. And that's basically it, my 5 cents.
Okay, thank you very much, Sami. Tim?
Tim Peters, originally from Germany, but I've lived in the region for the last 9 years, part of the leadership team of the Communications, Media and Technology practice of Kearney in the Middle East. We advise top management and all key stakeholders and boards of regulators, as well as operators and really all industry players. Dr. Abdelfattah mentioned some of the numbers in the beginning. We heard Ericsson's new numbers yesterday. We heard the CEO of Zain drop a lot of numbers on us. It's a digital tsunami, I would call it, that is really approaching. It's developed its own momentum. It's a wave that you cannot hold back. So this will for sure drive the market in a sense. Now the big question is, and this is also what Her Highness yesterday in her opening speech, the Princess, has mentioned, is how does a market manage to build the future rather than rush into some quick profits? So it does help for every market and for every region and probably globally to hold back, get the key stakeholders together and think about a big plan. There will be lots of controversies because every stakeholder will fight for its own turf, but it's worthwhile thinking all these controversies through and then taking jointly with the key stakeholders some key strategic decisions. So maybe I could just open the playing field and throw in some of those controversies from my view or from our view. First of all, I'd like to call that challenge mastering the hyper-speed digitization. This wave, you will not be able to hold it back. This wave is driven by the demand. It's already out there, whether your broadband access will be mobile or fixed, it's out there for sure. It's almost like Moore's law going digital, doubling speeds. I think even the numbers that Ericsson and you mentioned might be too small. They might be much higher than that. We're completely underestimating this. I would just like to remind and wind back to the 90s when the mobile prepaid phone was introduced and when the business plans were made for mobility for penetrations of 2, 3, 4, perhaps 5%. It was a vast underestimation, and today we're at above 100% in most of the markets. I think we're vastly underestimating also the digital demand here. So when looking at the market's influence on this broadband, I'd like to maybe mention a few controversies along 4 criteria. One is demand, another one is regulation, another one is technology, and a 4th one is competition. Now, in terms of demand, I think a lot of companies are trying to preempt demand, trying to predict what the users will do. That's a tough challenge. I think what's a big challenge enough is to even understand that demand, trying to read what users are doing and understand it. And this is being labeled today as big data on one side. And this is where it's worthwhile investing for all stakeholders, governments, regulators, as well as telcos and other companies, investing into understanding the markets, and not only in terms of data, but in terms of focus groups, listen to the key stakeholders, listen to the users. What is it that they need? What is it that they would like to have? So very often, I think there's an under-investment in trying to understand what users are actually doing and what they need. There's initiatives in the region. The UAE just launched an e-government initiative where you can completely set up your own business over mobile. These are interesting applications. And given that in the Arab region, the use of social media is even higher than in the US, I think it's definitely worthwhile understanding the local side of the demand. It will look largely different from the rest of the world. Point number 2 is regulation, and there have been good discussions here in this forum, and yesterday we also had a gentleman who's the chairman of the ETNO group of all telecom operators in Europe mention how there could be some similarities here in the Arab markets and the European markets in a sense that the markets are very fragmented, there's many different players, and they're also subject to the same challenge and threat of over-the-top players which are global, which don't have high capex investments, which can use the data highways at free cost and reach the customers. So the ETNO in Europe is now also in cooperation with AT Kearney on a path of trying to find a more optimal roadmap and define that and try to have, let's say, from an economic perspective, a better use of the telecom and deployment of the telecom investments. So here the controversy is between net neutrality and let's say a more Pareto optimal economic path. Number 3, technology, and technology has been the key driver of broadband and will continue to be so. I see a controversy here between complexity versus convergence. So while Dr. Abdelfattah already mentioned 5G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, FTTH, all these different technologies, all these acronyms, just imagine you have to manage a patchwork of such networks in the background. And here, partnership, convergence, consolidation, perhaps starting discussions about one joint network, maybe even in the region, could be beneficial and could help governments to address the controversy in a common manner. So some countries dig up the ground 3 times, 4 times, other countries just impose a government-owned fixed-line company and make the private companies lay off their assets. There's definitely a need to take a strategic decision here. And lastly, the point number 4 is competition that drives the market. And here the controversy is vertical and horizontal battles in the telecom industry versus smart partnering. And probably one of the key skills any company and any institution can develop is that of partnering, being able to work out solutions jointly and focusing more on your core skills rather than trying to be a one-stop shop and offering everything end to end.
Thank you, Tim. Andreas?
Good morning, everybody. Ericsson has released its latest mobility report yesterday, and I hope all of you had time to go to ericsson.com and download a copy. It gives great insights, and my colleague had a speech yesterday about some of those insights. One thing we saw was that we had an inflection point in 2009. In 2009, the global traffic coming from voice was overtaken by data traffic, 2009. Since then, data traffic has grown by 2 times, doubled every year. So again, from Q1 2012 to Q1 2013, we doubled the amount of data carried on networks. But voice has increased by 4% only. The development of data growth will continue. And what does that mean for voice? Voice will be noise on our networks in the future. It will be so small that it's just there, but we don't really care about it. It's just there. We are able to handle it. Data will be the challenge. What do we use data for? Especially here in the Middle East, it's mainly video at the moment. At least 50% is video content. We consume TV channels over different networks today. We have multi-screen solutions, so we watch TV on iPads. So what does that mean? It means that today we don't use telecom networks anymore for means they were intended for. They were intended for voice, SMS of course later, but now we consume all kinds of multimedia content and video over those telecom networks. So what happened is that the digitalization has decoupled the content from the transport layer. Looking at the regulatory framework, we see that the regulation is still organized in domains. So we have telecom regulation, we have internet regulation, we have content regulation, IPR, and so on, which means the challenge we have at the moment that there is a regulatory uncertainty, you could say, because very similar services are regulated in very different ways, depending on the technology platform. So this is something we have started to look at intensively because we see that this could become a hurdle. A hurdle especially when we look at professional and lawful content. So we are not so much interested in user-generated content. This will be there, and this is great to have. But driving the development of lawful and professional content needs to be enforced in order to stimulate usage and stimulate creativity in the future. So the regulatory environment is key. Thank you, Doctor.